The world had never been kind to me, but I couldn't blame anyone but myself. I'd spent 10 years locked up in a cell, watching my life wither away like old paper in the rain. When I finally got out, the world had moved on. No one was waiting for me. My friends, if I'd ever had any, had disappeared. My family had written me off long ago. No wife, no kids. I was just Mike, a ghost of the man I used to be, trying to start over with nothing but a record that followed me like a shadow. The job came to me through one of those halfway house pamphlets they shove in your hand when you're released from prison. Most of the time, the jobs in those flyers were garbage. Backbreaking work in warehouses or shady under-the-table gigs. But I wasn't picky. I needed anything that would keep me out of trouble and away from the streets. I'd been inside for a violent assault, something that started as an argument and spiraled out of control. That's how it always goes, isn't it? One bad decision, and suddenly you're spending a decade in a cage, staring at cinderblock walls and wondering where it all went wrong. I didn't have any skills, no college degree, and no one was willing to take a chance on someone with my kind of baggage. That's why, when I saw the posting for a security job at the Paramount Theater, I was desperate enough to believe it was my second chance. The ad was simple. Night security guard wanted, must work alone, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The only qualifications were that you had to be reliable and able to work overnight. No experience required. It sounded like something I could handle. No boss breathing down my neck, no coworkers to deal with, just me, an empty theater, and a paycheck. It was something at least, a chance to rebuild. And when you've got nothing, even a crack in the door can look like an open highway. The theater itself was in a part of town that had seen better days. I took the bus there, winding through streets lined with boarded up shops and crumbling apartment buildings. By the time I got off, it was just past 9:30 p.m., and the sky was a deep dark blue, the kind that swallows all the stars. The Paramount loomed ahead of me, a relic of another era. Back in its heyday, it must have been one of those grand, old-fashioned movie palaces, the kind with sweeping staircases and velvet curtains. But now, it was just a shadow of what it had been. The marquee above the entrance was cracked, the lights burned out or flickering weakly. The ornate doors were rusted at the hinges, and the windows were covered in a thick layer of dust. I hesitated outside the entrance, wondering if I'd made a mistake. The place looked like it hadn't seen a customer in decades, but I didn't have the luxury of being picky. I needed this. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and a bell overhead jangled, the sound hollow and metallic. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of mildew and dust. The lobby was dimly lit, the only light coming from a single bulb hanging over the old concession stand. A faded popcorn machine sat behind the counter, the glass fogged over with age. And then I saw him, Mr. Blackwell. He stood behind the counter, a small man in a threadbare suit that had seen better days. His skin was pale, almost waxy, like he'd been drained of color. His eyes were sharp, though, dark and sunken as if they'd seen far more than they should have. "You must be Mike," he said, his voice raspy as if he hadn't spoken to anyone in a long time. He didn't offer a handshake, he just stared at me with that unsettling gaze. "Yeah," I replied, feeling a chill creep up my spine. "That's me, I'm here for the job." He didn't ask for a resume, didn't ask about my past or why I'd been out of work for so long. Instead, he just nodded and walked out from behind the counter, motioning for me to follow him down the narrow hallway leading deeper into the theater. The floor creaked beneath our feet as we walked, the sound echoing in the empty space. The walls were lined with old movie posters, faded and torn at the edges. Some of the titles were ones I recognized from old Hollywood films, but most were unfamiliar, movies that must have been forgotten by time. Mr. Blackwell led me into the security office, a small room tucked away behind the lobby. Inside was a desk cluttered with papers, an ancient black and white monitor showing various angles of the theater, and an old rotary phone mounted on the wall. On the desk was a flashlight, a walkie-talkie, and a set of keys. "Your job is simple," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "Walk the floors, check the doors, make sure everything's in order. 10 to 6, that's all we ask." I nodded, feeling a sense of unease settling in the pit of my stomach. Something about his tone, The way he looked at me like I was a piece of meat sent a shiver down my spine. What? I needed the money. I needed the job. Anything I should know about? I asked, trying to sound casual. You know, any weird stuff I should look out for? He gave me a thin smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. Do you believe in ghosts? He asked. That caught me by surprise. No, not really, I stammered. He wasn't about to say the theater was haunted, was he? The theater's haunted, Blackwell said curtly. I tried to keep my face straight as a chuckle of disbelief welled within me. Whether you believe me or not, there's a few rules you need to follow. I wanted to believe he was joking, but his face was deadly serious. First, stay out of the projector room, he said as he pulled a folded sheet of paper from his coat pocket. He unfolded the paper and spread it on the desk. It was a map of the theater. The projector room was a half-circle room upstairs with 3 theater rooms spread in a half-circle around it. The main theater was front and center, with 2 smaller theaters on either side. On the flat side had a window overlooking the lobby. There's a large set of ornate double doors on the main floor leading into the large theater. On either side was a small hallway with doors into the small theaters. The security office was on the right wing. There were several rooms on the flat sides across from the theater rooms downstairs, and were labeled things like storage, utility, and, of course, the security office. All the way at the end of the right wing was a room labeled APT. Blackwell tapped his finger on the projector room. No matter what, he said as his eyes met mine, you must not go in that room. Okay, I chuckled nervously. I'll stay out, I swear. Blackwell nodded quickly. Good, he muttered, and then continued while pointing at the map. Here are theater entrances. Utilities here, and here's the restrooms. Here's this office, and here, he tapped the room labeled APT, is my apartment. I'll be there all night with a walkie-talkie. If you run into trouble, try the walkie first. If I don't answer, then come knock on my door. I nodded. Okay, sure, but what kind of trouble are we talking about here? I asked. Blackwell's eyes met mine once more, and he looked hesitant, like he didn't want to tell me any more than he had to. Listen, son, he said softly. Sometimes the projector turns on by itself. If that happens, don't watch the film. Just look down at the ground and close the doors to that theater, and you stay out of that room the rest of the night. I stared slack-jawed for a moment before stammering. Yeah, sure, will do. Good, he muttered again. His eyes bore into mine with a haunting sort of sadness. Well then, he said. Other than that, just check the doors time to time and watch the cameras. Sometimes teenagers try to get in. Yeah, no problem, I replied. With that, he turned and left, leaving me alone in the office with nothing but the hum of the old monitor and the weight of his cryptic warnings hanging in the air. The clock struck 10, and my first shift began. At first, it was exactly what I expected. The theater was dead quiet, the kind of silence that presses down on you, makes you hyper aware of every creak, every distant sound. I started my rounds, walking the halls, checking the exits, making sure the doors were locked. It was just me, my flashlight, and the echo of my own footsteps. The main theater was a massive, cavernous room with rows upon rows of old, worn-out seats. The screen at the front was enormous, stretching from floor to ceiling. The whole place had the feel of something forgotten, a relic of a time when going to the movies was an event, not just something you did on a lazy Sunday. The first hour passed without incident. I paced the aisles, shone my light into the dark corners, and made my way back to the security office to check the monitors. Everything seemed normal, if a little eerie. But then, around 1 a.m., things started to get strange. I was on my second round, walking through the lobby when I heard it. A soft, distant sound, like the rustling of fabric. It was faint, but in the dead silence of the theater, it stood out like a gunshot. I stopped, listening. The sound was coming from the main theater. Hello? I called out, my voice echoing off the walls. Anyone in here? No answer. Just more of that soft rustling, like someone shifting in their seat. I gripped my flashlight tighter and made my way into the theater, my heart pounding in my chest. At first, I didn't see anything. The seats were empty, the screen dark. But as I moved down the aisle, shining my light across the rows, I saw it. A figure sitting in one of the seats near the front. I froze. My mind raced. No one else was supposed to be here. The theater was supposed to be empty. "Hey," I called out, moving closer. "You're not supposed to be here. This place is closed." The figure didn't move. It just sat there, perfectly still, staring straight ahead at the blank screen. I took a few more steps, my flashlight beam shaking in my hand. The closer I got, the worse the smell became. A thick, cloying stench of rotten decay that made my stomach churn. "Sir," I said, my voice quieter now, tinged with unease. I was close enough now to see that the figure wasn't just sitting still, it was dead. The man's skin was pale, waxy, stretched tight over his bones. His eyes were wide open, staring into nothing, and his mouth was slack, frozen in what looked like a silent scream. The smell was overpowering, like something had crawled into that seat and died weeks ago. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. I'd seen dead bodies before. Years in prison would do that to you. There was something wrong about this. This wasn't a natural death. This was something else. And then the projector flickered to life. The sudden hum of the machine filled the theater, and the screen lit up with a bright, flickering image. I whipped around, my heart pounding, but there was no one in the projection booth. No one had turned it on. A film began to play, grainy, black and white. The footage was old, shaky, like it had been recorded decades ago on one of those ancient hand crank cameras. It showed an audience sitting in the very seats I was standing in front of. Rows of people dressed in old-fashioned clothes, watching the screen with rapt attention. But there was something wrong with them. Their faces were pale, too pale, frozen in grotesque masks of terror. Their eyes were wide open, mouths agape, but no sound coming from their throats. Their skin was waxy, just like the corpse I'd seen in the front row. I suddenly remembered Blackwell's words, "Don't watch the film." And I quickly looked at the ground. My stomach twisted into knots, and my skin prickled with cold sweat. The film continued to roll as I backed up, nearly tripping over one of the seats behind me. I wanted to scream, to run. My legs felt like lead. Then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, I heard something behind me. A whisper. "You shouldn't be here." It was so faint, like a breath against the back of my neck. I spun around, but there was no one, just the empty, decaying seats of the theater, rows and rows of them, stretching into the darkness. The corpse in the front row hadn't moved, but I could have sworn I heard that whisper come from his direction. I turned and bolted up the aisle, my heart hammering in my chest. The air felt thicker, like it was pushing against me, slowing me down. I burst through the doors into the lobby, gasping for breath. The sound of the projector followed me, its hum growing louder, more insistent. I turned and slammed the grandiose doors shut, fumbling with my keys as I desperately locked them. I stumbled a few steps, gasping for air, and leaned against the wall. I squeezed my eyes shut and focused on controlling my breathing. I had to be imagining things, right? Maybe there's a weird mold in here or something, I thought. My walkie-talkie crackled to life, static, buzzing in my ears. The voice was deep, otherworldly. It wasn't Blackwell, it sure as hell wasn't me. I grabbed the walkie-talkie, my hands shaking, and fumbled with the buttons trying to shut it off. The static grew louder, the voice echoing through the empty theater. I didn't need to be told twice. I sprinted towards the exit, grabbing the door handle and yanking it with all my strength. It didn't budge. I pulled harder, my breath coming in ragged gasps, but the door was stuck, locked tight. Panic gripped me as I glanced around the lobby, looking for another way out. Every door, every window was sealed shut, as if the theater itself had come alive, trapping me inside. Then I heard the footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, and they were coming from upstairs, above the main theater. They were coming from the direction of the projector room. My heart jumped into my throat as I turned towards the sound, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The light flickered again, barely illuminating the darkened stairway. A figure was standing at the top of the stairs, barely visible in the shadows. It was tall, its limbs too long, its head tilted unnaturally to the side. I couldn't make out its face, not that I wanted to, but I could feel its eyes on me, watching.
"You are not supposed to watch the films."
The voice from the walkie-talkie repeated, echoing through the static. The figure in the hallway took a step towards me, its footfalls heavy, deliberate. I backed away, my back hitting the concession counter. My mind was screaming at me to do something, anything, but my body refused to listen. I was frozen in place, terror coursing through my veins like ice. The figure moved closer, its outline becoming clearer. It wasn't human. Its limbs were too long, its posture hunched, its movements unnatural, like a puppet on strings. My flashlight flickered again, and for a brief moment, the light caught its face. I wish it hadn't. Its eyes were hollow, empty sockets that seemed to absorb the light. Its skin was stretched thin over a skeletal frame, the bones underneath sharp and jagged. And its mouth was too wide, filled with rows of jagged, broken teeth. It grinned at me, a grotesque, knowing smile that sent a fresh wave of terror through me. I stumbled backward, my foot catching on the edge of the counter. I fell hard, my flashlight skittering across the floor, plunging the lobby into near darkness. The walkie-talkie continued to hiss with static, the voice growing fainter. I crawled backward, my hands shaking, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The figure was almost on me now, its long, bony fingers reaching out, its mouth stretching wider, wider. Suddenly, the lights in the lobby flickered on, blinding fluorescent lights that flooded the room with harsh, artificial brightness. The figure stopped in its tracks, its head snapping towards the lights as if surprised. I stood there for a moment, frozen, before slowly retreating back into the shadows. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding in my ears. The theater was still, the projector silent. I glanced around, disoriented, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The figure was gone, the footsteps had stopped, and the lobby was empty again. For a brief moment, I thought it was over. Maybe the lights had scared it off. Maybe whatever haunted this place was afraid of the light. I turned and ran to the security office, slamming and locking the door behind me. I leaned against the wall, gasping for air. I couldn't seem to stop shaking. Then, the phone on the wall rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The old rotary phone hadn't made a sound since I'd arrived. The shrill, metallic ring cut through the silence like a knife. I stared at it, my heart racing. Part of me wanted to leave it, ignore it, but another part of me, the part that knew I wasn't getting out of here without answers, reached for the receiver. With trembling hands, I lifted the phone to my ear. "Hello?" There was a pause, then a voice, a familiar voice. "You were told not to watch the films." It was Blackwell, but his voice sounded different now. Cold, detached, like he was speaking from somewhere far away. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "What the hell is this place?" "You shouldn't have watched," he replied, his tone flat. "You're in grave danger." "What is this? What are you talking about?" I shouted. The line went dead. I slammed the receiver down, my hands shaking with fear and frustration. None of this made any sense. I needed to get out of here, but the doors I had tried, they weren't open. It was like every exit was sealed shut. I sat in the office shaking for a while, watching the security monitors. Everything was still and quiet. Around 3 a.m., I decided to venture back out to see if I could find the exit that worked. I crept into the lobby, which was, once again, lit only by the single dangling bulb over concessions. I shone my light around looking for anything out of the ordinary, but everything seemed normal. I breathed a sigh of relief. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. The old concession stand. The popcorn machine. The glass was no longer fogged over. It was clear, and something was moving inside, slowly, like it had been waiting for me to notice. I swallowed hard, stepping closer, my heart pounding in my chest. The machine was empty, at least it should have been. But as I peered through the glass, I saw them, tiny, pale hands pressed against the inside of the glass, clawing at it. Hands too small to belong to any adult. I stumbled back, my pulse racing. The machine rattled, shaking as whatever inside it struggled to get out. The glass cracked, a small hairline fracture spreading across the surface. I wasn't waiting around to see what came next. I bolted back towards the hallway, towards the security room. I didn't know where else to go. The exit was sealed, the phone was dead, and something in that machine was about to break free. As I ran, I could hear the sound of the glass shattering behind me, the crackling of small bones as something crawled out. My mind was screaming. My body was in overdrive, my instincts telling me to get as far away as possible. But the wall seemed to shift, bending the space in impossible ways. The building was becoming a maze. I ran into a T that shouldn't exist, and I turned right, and then left, and then right again. I had no idea where I was going, just that I couldn't stop. And then, I found myself back in the main theater. The screen was still on, flickering with the same grainy footage of the audience from before. But now, the audience wasn't just on the screen. They were here. Dozens of them, sitting in the seats, their pale, dead eyes locked on me. Twisted, broken bodies, contorted in ways no human body should be. They were the same figures from the film, but now they were real, right in front of me, and they were watching me, just like they had been watching the screen. My knees buckled. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. My body felt heavy, weighed down by terror and exhaustion.
Part of the show now.
The voice whispered, this time from everywhere at once, surrounding me, suffocating me. The lights dimmed and I heard the projector click on again, louder this time. I turned, knowing I shouldn't, but I couldn't help myself. The screen had changed. It was no longer showing the grotesque audience. Now, it was showing me. A grainy, black and white version of myself, standing in the theater, staring up at the screen. It wasn't just me. Behind me, in the film, the shadows were moving. I turned around slowly, dread building inside me. The figures from the seats had risen. They stood behind me now, their contorted bodies slowly closing the distance between us. The sound of bones cracking, joints popping filled the air as they moved in jerky, unnatural motions, like marionettes with invisible strings pulling them forward. I backed away, heart racing, but there was nowhere to go. I was surrounded, the screen in front of me flickering, showing a live feed of my own terror. The projector's hum grew louder, more oppressive, filling the room with an eerie, mechanical drone that seemed to vibrate in my skull. The voice whispered again, and I could feel it now, something tugging at me, pulling me towards the screen. I turned my gaze to it, unable to resist. The grainy image of myself flickered and warped, the shadows behind me in the film growing longer and darker. Slowly, they swallowed the version of me on the screen, and I could feel the cold fingers of the darkness creeping towards me in real life. I didn't know what to do. My body was frozen, paralyzed by fear, but my mind was screaming at me to move, to fight, to do something. Anything. But nothing worked. The figures were closer now, their hollow eyes fixed on me, their twisted limbs twitching with each step. Then, from the darkness of the theater, I heard it. The sound of a film reel spinning down, slowing to a stop. The screen flickered one last time, and the image of myself disappeared, replaced by something far worse. A face, hollow eyes, too wide and too dark. A mouth stretched unnaturally into a grin that seemed to split its face in two. It was the same figure I'd seen in the hallway, the one that had been chasing me. But now it was larger, more distorted, its grin impossibly wide as it watched me from the screen.
It's too late for you now.
It whispered, its voice echoing through the theater. The figures in the seats stopped moving. They stood still, their heads slowly turned towards the screen as if waiting for a cue. The projector began to hum again, and the lights in the theater dimmed until there was nothing but the glow of the screen and the shadowy figures standing all around me. I turned in circles, desperate for an escape, but the exit doors were gone. The walls seemed to stretch and shift, bending in on themselves, warping like a funhouse of horrors. I could hear faint whispers all around me, voices murmuring words I couldn't understand, growing louder, more insistent with each passing second. Then the screen flickered once more, and I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Another figure standing behind me. It wasn't one of the twisted, broken audience members. It wasn't the figure from the hallway. This one was different, taller, darker. I whipped around, my heart nearly stopping in my chest. Standing at the back of the theater, towering over the seats, was a figure cloaked in shadow, its outline barely visible in the dim light. Its eyes gleamed, pinpricks of crimson in the darkness, and its long skeletal arms reached out towards me, beckoning. It wasn't like the others. This one was worse. Much worse.
You've watched too much.
The voice rasped from the shadows, low and distorted, vibrating through the very walls of the theater.
Now you belong to us.
The lights flickered one last time, and the shadowed figure began to move slowly, deliberately, gliding towards me as if it were floating above the ground. The air grew cold, and I could feel its presence sucking the warmth out of the room, pulling me toward it like gravity. My mind screamed, but my body wouldn't listen. I was rooted to the spot, my feet glued to the sticky floor as the figure drew closer and closer, its red eyes boring into me, its mouth opening wide to reveal rows of jagged, broken teeth. "Help!" I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. But there was no one to help. No one was coming. I was alone, trapped in this haunted, decaying theater, surrounded by the dead and the damned. The shadowed figure reached out, its long, bony fingers brushing against my arm. The touch was ice cold, like death itself. A wave of nausea rolled through me, and my vision blurred. My body felt heavy, sluggish, like I was sinking into quicksand.
Now it's your turn.
The whisper came from right next to me, too close, too intimate. The shadow loomed over me, its grin widening until it was nothing but a grotesque, gaping maw. The audience of twisted, broken bodies began to move again, their dead eyes fixed on me, their silent screams echoing in my head. I tried to scream, to run, but my voice was gone, swallowed by the oppressive darkness that surrounded me. The shadow wrapped itself around me, and I could feel my strength slipping away, my will dissolving under its icy grip. And then, with a final flicker, the projector stopped, plunging the theater into complete darkness. Everything went silent. Cold. Empty. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer standing. I was laying on the floor of the security room. Mr. Blackwell crouched near me, panting and shaking. "You damned fool," he gasped. "I told you, didn't I?" My stomach turned as I rolled over and tried to sit up. My entire body was shaking, and I was freezing cold, yet I was soaked in sweat. "Don't try to get up yet," Blackwell said. "We'll be safe here until morning." He He pointed a trembling hand at the closed door, which seemed to vibrate in its frame. The gray metal, glowing orange runes carved all over it. As I stared, they flared brightly and then faded back to a dull glow as the door shook from some sort of impact. "It's a failsafe," Blackwell said, with his eyes closed as he tried to catch his breath. "It takes a tremendous amount of power, but it will hold until morning." I grunted as I pushed myself into a sitting position. "Power? What kind of power?" I asked. "And what the hell is that thing? And how did you save me?" Blackwell slowly opened his eyes and looked up at me. "To put it simply, it is evil, and I am its keeper," he said. I could feel my jaw go slack as I stared at him. "I was assigned here decades ago to keep this thing in check, but I'm fading in my old age. I am looking for a replacement, someone who could handle the job and wouldn't abandon his post." I'm sorry," I stammered, "but I don't think that's me." I looked down and realized I had pissed myself. When had that happened? The door shook violently again as the runes glowed furiously. I looked towards the security monitor, but it was turned off. "I know," Blackwell said. "It's okay. I'll keep you safe till morning, and then you can go." Blackwell was true to his word. We sat in the office for the remaining 2 hours or so until the clock struck 6. The entity never stopped attacking the door, but the door held. At 6, everything suddenly went quiet. Blackwell sighed and stood up, dusting himself off. "All right then, it's time to go," he said nonchalantly. I clambered to my feet and stumbled towards the door. Blackwell caught me and held my gaze for a moment. "You'll be all right," he said as he clapped me on the back, smiling gently. He turned and opened the door, and my eyes widened when I saw the other side. The metal surface was blackened and smoking. It looked like it had endured multiple grenades exploding against its surface. Mr. Blackwell kept his hand on my shoulder as we walked through the lobby towards the front doors. I half expected them to remain stubbornly closed as they had the night before, but they swung open easily when Mr. Blackwell pushed them. I staggered into the early morning light with tears of joy running down my face. "Take care of yourself," Blackwell mumbled. I gave him a quick glance over my shoulder and said nothing. I half ran, half stumbled through the parking lot. I couldn't get away fast enough. That night, I walked into a convenience store and threw a bag onto the counter. "Put the money in the bag," I growled at the startled cashier. I cocked the pistol in my hand and pointed it at his head. Then I turned and smiled at the camera. I knew I'd go back to prison for this. I'd probably get at least 20 years for violating parole, plus armed robbery. That was okay with me. I know how to handle the monsters on the inside. It's the monsters out here, with you all, that terrify me.